Hi, welcome to Lesson 5. We're going to be taking a slightly more whimsical, intensely colorful approach to our birds today. They won't be realistic. They will be birds that might fly through your imagination. We'll also take some actual real birds and do something impressionistic and colorful with them as well. So we're going to need, for the first part of this lesson, you'll need your good old hardware store brush, the same one we used in the inking. We're actually taking the textures from last week's inking lesson and translating some of those into watercolor for this week. So you will need your chip brush. You'll also need your sharpened stick. You'll need your 1-inch flat brush. You'll also need all three sizes of our watercolor brushes, the number 10 round, the number 4 round, and the little number 1 round. So before we get started, let's take a look at the way some of those textures translate into watercolor, the ones that we were using last week with our ink. We're going to start out by simply taking the chip brush and dipping the dry tips, the brush is very dry, there's no water on it, the dry tips into some wet watercolor. In this case, some phthalo blue. And just as with the ink, it creates a wonderful, sort of a smoky, soft, very delicate spatter texture. You can use the same brush, still very dry, to create that very soft sort of feathered, rough texture that we used last week. You can do that just exactly as with the ink, only you get a much softer result when you're using color. And also, you can rinse the color out, come back with the second color, let's get one that contrasts a little bit more. There we go. Just keeping the brush upright. You get a wonderful blending of color just by virtue of the way the textures blend together. Okay, so that's using the chip brush. Another thing you can do with your flat brush and your large round brush is take your large round brush, you can pick up some paint. I'm placing my finger underneath the brush about an inch above the paper and very gently tapping. The brush is sort of pointed downward so that the little spatters that I'm putting on the paper don't fly too far. Okay, now I've got one color. I'm going to rinse my brush, come back with a second color. In this case, I'll pick up some quinacridone rose, which will show up very well against the phthalo blue. Okay, I'm putting the rose down as well. Okay, and once I have both colors in place, I come back with our flat 1-inch brush, I'm going to rinse it and then wipe it off so that it's damp, it's not wet. Then I'm going to come back and I'm using just almost like we did with our chip brush. I'm using just the end grain, the tips of the brush with a little bouncing motion, very slight upward motion. This is a wonderful way, as you will find out in a few minutes, to create very quickly a texture that works really well for the breast feathers of a large bird. Okay, so you have that sort of, we put the spatter down and we came back and we worked our way back and forth across it. Dragging the flat brush also makes a wonderful texture. The brush is almost dry. It's very, very dry. None of this will work if the brush is wet. These are all dry brush techniques. Okay. Finally, we have our sharp stick, and you can use that with paint just the way we used it with the ink. You can actually draw with it. And you can also put down some color and then come back and score and you can get a lot of contrast just with that. As long as the paint is wet, it will create a kind of a shimmering surface on top of a color. Okay, so we have you have a PDF that has, in addition to these, another technique that we'll be doing in the second part of the lesson. But you have a PDF labeled texture sampler that has examples of all of these and brief labels so that you'll remember how to which tool you use to create what. So we're going to put these to work for us with a watercolor, a large watercolor of a hen. And a hen, chickens are certainly birds, but you don't often think of them when you think about drawing or painting birds. And yet, a chicken has a wonderful form and a great deal of personality. And so we're going to watercolor, give our textures a workout. We're going to watercolor a hen. I've sketched out a basic hen. You have some hen reference photos, and I also have put down, because we're not really concerned with a great deal of realism with this lesson. The hen is very, very simple and just some very basic shapes. And so I've also included my sketch, and that might inspire a hen that you can just create from your own imagination. But we're going to begin by using the very technique that we spoke about a moment ago. And for this hen, I'm going to use two colors. I'm going to use Pyrrole Orange and Phthalo Blue. I'm going to use those two colors because they combine to make a warm brown, which is nice, but also because they can be darkened with the addition of more phthalo blue down to an almost a black color, and that will come in handy as well. And complements, colors that are opposite one another on the color wheel, work very, very nicely together. So we're going to begin by putting down in the breast area of the hen a layer or a selection of orange spatters and a selection of our phthalo blue spatters. So I'll begin with the orange. And the paint, of course, has to be very liquid for this process. Okay. All right, I'm going to rest it on my finger. The brush is pointed down. And it's perfectly fine if some of the spatters go outside the hen's body, because as you'll see in a moment, the spatters on the interior of the body will not be spatters for long. Okay. And some, maybe a bit more. And some phthalo blue, done the same way. Thin it down so that it's nice and drippable. And I'm just putting a layer down right on top, same area where orange spatters went. Okay, now we're ready. I'm going to rinse off the brush and set it aside. Okay, I have our damp 1-inch round, a 1-inch flat brush, and I'm going to start at the bottom. And start working my way up. And you don't want to cover up all the white. You want to leave some white spaces in between so that you have a little bit of light there. Okay. All right. Go ahead and bring it down. And I'm sort of following the rounded bulge of the hen's body. Okay. Okay. Rinsing off my brush. And all right, I'm going to stick with my blue brush. It's a very large brush, but that's okay. That will help us not to be too fussy. I'm going to simply pick up some phthalo blue. Okay, and now I'm going to paint in I'm using the corner of the brush. I'm going to paint in the neck and the tail area with a layer of blue. And if you let your strokes be sort of short strokes in the direction that the feathers grow, then any overlap or any marks that show up will just look even more like feathers because you'll have that short little texture. All right. Okay, pick up a little water here. Okay, pull this on down. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm putting just a layer of blue. Okay, let that sort of fade into our color from earlier. Also going to go on around the front of the hen here with our blue. Okay, there we go. Also going to come up, got a little, there we go, come up here and paint in her tail as well. I have a little hair on my paper, there we go. All right. Okay. And you want to be careful not to make a straight line. Her feathers have texture and she has a lot of sort of ruffled edges, so we're going to let those ruffled edges just continue. I'm laying the brush down a little bit. Okay, let's kind of fade into her. There we go. Okay, also going to come down and put a little bit of sort of furry, feathery texture right there. All right. Okay. Break up the edge here. All right, very good. Alrighty. Okay, well we are going to rinse off our big flat brush. I'm going to come back with our number 10 round brush and we're going to get just some orange that is thinned out with a tiny touch of blue added back to just to tone down the color a bit, and come over and paint around her eye. Okay. All right, we've got her eye painted in, or the area around her eye. I'm going to use that same color, orange, with a tiny bit of blue mixed in to tone it down a little, to paint her feet using just a few strokes. Okay, I'm going to finish the stroke up near her body so that the water or the pigment that gathers there will create the impression of a shadow. Okay, and her other leg is her other foot as well. She has big bulbous toes. Okay. And going up to finish, conclude our painting up just beneath where these feathers. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll allow the feet to dry a little. All right. Okay, I'm also going to take just a touch of quinacridone rose that has a tiny bit of our orange mixed in and put in her comb and her wattle. Okay. Remember that if you want to control your brush better, hold it, or if you need a finer line or sharper control, hold the brush vertically and use very light texture so that you have just the tip making contact with the paper. All right. Okay. Lift a little bit out of here just for sake of contrast. Come back with a dry brush, drag it through and pick up just a little bit of that comb. Okay. All right, we are about halfway there. Next we are going to allow our comb to dry for a few minutes, and we're going to come back still using our large number 10 round. We're going to pick up some phthalo blue. I'm going to add a little bit, just a touch, of orange back to it, which will deepen it and darken it. And I can come on up and start to add in her tail feathers, the texture of the tail feathers, rather. Okay, and I'm doing that more or less by just setting the brush down. Okay. And if it's too dark and you need to lift, that's fine. Just dry your brush and come back. the brush is beginning to dry now, and so remember to work in the direction that the feathers grow. You can take advantage of that texture of the dry brush. Okay, and I'm letting the sort of dry texture gradually fade into this rounded area of the hen's body. Come over here as well. Okay. All right, and I'm going to, as our feet have dried, I'm going to come down with our smallest brush, take a little bit of our orange, mix it with the blue, our same two colors. We're using just those two basic colors for everything. With more blue and less orange, we get a very nice reddish brown. So we'll put the shadow at the top of the legs. We'll pull one down where it can come on down the leg a little bit. Okay, and then just make some texture on the, suggest the scales of the chicken's legs, chicken's feet. Okay. Okay, we've got these very nice feet, and we'll put some toenails on them as well. All right. Also use a bit of just our blue and run a shadow, not underneath the entire foot, but just here and there. And this will help to anchor our chicken on the paper. Okay, all right. All right, we're going to jump back up. Going to mix a very dark blue. It's our quinacridone blue with some orange. Creates an extremely dark blue. And using our smallest brush, we'll go ahead and put in the chicken's eye. Remember to leave a highlight. In the pupil. And our same combination gives us a nice reddish brown color. That we can use for texture. face. Just making little marks. This will help to keep this patch of brown from looking too flat. Okay. Come back with a bit darker as well. Okay, and we can also use our dark blue color to paint in the beak. Put a line down and then come back, lay the brush down and just pull it along. Pull that color downward very softly. All right. Okay. All right, we're going to mix an extremely dark blue and come in and put some of our darkest feathers on our bird. Almost looks black. It's so dark. It's just a good, strong pool of phthalo, and then we come in with our orange, which doesn't make it any lighter, but it helps to move it toward neutral, and it makes a wonderful color. That's a very black looking color. I'm going to turn the paper so that I can work with my wrist. I'm using the point of the brush. I'm going to start just above the eye, and I'm going to start dropping in. These sort of really dark feathers. They blend up into the lighter area of the chicken's face, and then they come down. You have the feathers. They're almost very long, very graceful feathers, and you want to preserve a little bit of the blue in between these feathers so that the blue shows still. So you have it there as a sort of a reflective layer. Okay, and then we've got this dark color comes under the wattle, and the feathers are shorter on the front of the chicken. And once again, we're going to let some of our blue show through. Okay. We're also going to take our chip brush, and we're going to pick up some of this very dark color, and we're going to use it to shade a bit just in front of where the chicken's leg is, to create sort of a shadow under the body. Okay. And out at the edges, you can use it very gently, and it begins to create a sort of a feathery texture. I'm also going to take my chip brush, because the head is very neat and tidy. I'm going to put a little bit of texture just up around the face and the eye, just to break up that very precise look. Okay, I like that much better. Okay. All right, our little black hen is taking shape. Okay, I'm going to shade around the base of the saddle feathers here on her body. And this helps to break up the transition between the light and dark areas on your hen. It gives her an interesting texture. And it's sort of that same bouncing motion, bouncing and slightly dragging. It's just a very, very, very gentle motion. Okay, and then I'm going to also put that upward texture, let it just follow right on around. Okay. All right. Okay, I think I'm going to add a little bit of shadow down one side of her tail, and then I think she will be essentially finished. Put a little bit. All right. Okay, well there's our little black hen. Okay, and you can use, you can certainly use differing amounts of brown and differing amounts of blue to make a hen that's lighter in color. The one, I'll post a picture of one that uses the same three colors, and yet is very different in tone, because it's more of the orange and less of the blue. So you can kind of play with that and see what you think about it. All right, but that gives you an idea of ways that we can use the same techniques that we used with our ink. We can come back and use those also with paint, with a similar but slightly different result. So what I would like you to do is make a simple sketch of a hen, and it's just a good way to test drive these textures. We'll She doesn't quite fit on the screen. I'll post a photograph of this hen on the website, and I'll also post a picture of her sister, the hen that's done with a slightly different tone. And go ahead and experiment with them. Just get a feel for the way these textures work with watercolor before we go on to do our project bird. And I'll see you back here in a little while. Happy drawing.